Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we'll be talking about something called concatenation and also the properties of doubles and integers. So, like we discussed before, we want to write to the compiler, and so we will write this code. Oops, sorry, caps lock. And just like that. And don't forget you have to have a semicolon at the end, and this is just a blank statement, so if we just run this, it will just return a blank statement. So now let's write in our little comment section just so that we can type out what we're thinking. Let's say we want to have 2 divided by 3. Well, we really break it down here. Let me have some spaces so you can see clearly. 2 divided by 3 is going to be a fraction, and if you work it out, it's going to be 0.66 repeating, right? But in Java, or computer programming in general, this is incorrect. If you plug in 2 divided by 3, it won't give you the correct answer, and I'll show you why. 2 is an integer, and 3 is also an integer. That will be playing a huge role in why 2 divided by 3 won't give a decimal. So we take 2 divided by 3 and we run it, and it will not give a decimal. In fact, it gives 0. That's really strange, right? Because even if we write 0.6 repeating, well, in classical terms, just keep going and going and going. If you round up, it should be like 0.67, right? 67, or maybe even if we round even closer, it should be 0.7. That's really strange. Why does it round down to 0? Well, in computer programming, here let me have another comment. If it is an integer, if both numbers are integers, then the quotient, in this case, quotient, rounds to the nearest number. Yeah, number. So that is very key. Oops, sorry. Nearest number. I can't type today. So, even though 2 divided by 3, if we really round it, it's going to be 0.7. In Java, this is going to be, well, if we round up to 1, that's just us in the regular mathematical world. But the closest is the closest is 0. Actually, even disregard this. If we have 0.99 for example, just keep on going and going and going and going. This will be leading to, and you guessed it, 0. So if this were to be changed from a 0 repeating to 1.9 repeating, and you convert this into, let's say, both have to be integers, obviously. The numerator and denominator have to be integers. This will be equal to 1. Oops. My mouse is all weird. This will be equal to 1. Now, here's something that we don't do in the classical world. What happens if instead, let me erase this. What happens if instead of 2 divided by 3, where we have 2 as our integer and 3 as our integer, what happens when we make 3 a double? Well, let's try it out and see what happens. And as it will be really surprising when we run it, it will give our expected value of a regular 2 divided by 3. So what's going on here? Well, what's happening is something called casting. And this is usually from an integer to a double, right? This is when a double, or like we call it, a decimal, changes an integer to also be equal to a decimal, or in this case a double. So let's see what happens when we make this 2.0. Exactly the same as 2. Oops, that's my fault. Exactly the same as 2, and we run it. It's going to give the exact same answer. So it's indirectly changing the argument of 2 from an integer to a double. Alright, now let's switch it up. Now we're going to be talking about concatenation. I know it's a weird word. Let me write it over here. Um, Here, let's have this little bar instead of doing these. Concatenation. This is the word concatenation, and this basically means plus sign. Now we see, for example, this is not an example of concatenation. Let me just think of an example. 2 plus 5. This is not concatenation. This is going to sound really weird and a very strange concept, but you can add strings together. Let's say, if I want to say, of course, like we said in the earlier example, in order to have a string, you need to have double quotes and say, I want food. But now, let's say I can't write anymore. Okay, so now I start a new quotes, and water. But now it gives an error. That's because we need to concatenate this. This basically weaves both of these strings together. So now, here, let me put a space here and you'll see why. I want food and water. So it combines both of these two. Now here's a cool part about this. Yeah, big deal. We could just go like this, and it's exactly the same thing. I want food and water. It'll give the exact same thing. But the reason why we use concatenation is we can add numbers to them. So I want food, and here let's go back to the example here, and we delete these two. I want food and water, as well as here. Now we're going to have a concatenation, and you'll see what I'm doing here. 5 hours of sleep. So now, even though 5 is not a type string, right? String is defined by these quotation marks. It is an integer. It can be woven into this string, but it is not a type of string. So when we write it, I want food and water as well as 5 hours of sleep. Let's try one more example of concatenation, and don't get confused if we say I want food and water as well as 5 plus 3 plus 5 plus 3 plus hours of sleep. These are going to be concatenated plus signs, whereas this is going to be just a regular 5 plus 3 problem. So here, this is very strange. We would expect 5 plus 3, right? But the computer knows we're handling with strings, so it is going to instead make 5 plus 3 instead of 8, make it 53. Let's try another sentence and see if you can catch on. I was learning about how about this? I got a blank on my test. We don't know yet. That's the cool part. I don't know. I got a blank on my test. And to get rid of these little squiggly marks, let's put down a 94.0. I got a 94.0 on my test. So this is how it works. And you can also say the same thing without doing all this fancy stuff, you might argue, but this is going to be very important when we get into the next concept, which is variables. Concatenation will be very important with variables.